All right, guys, Aaron Slater here, owner of Relentless Defender Apparel, and we are here in the Ground Zero Media studio, and we have a special guest speaker today, and a special guest and good friend of mine, Nick Daughtry. Nick Daughtry is the owner of the Financial Cop. So let me introduce you, Nick, real quick. You are a former full-time police officer. Now you are a reserve police officer, and you now own and run, from what I understand, the Financial Cop. So just give us a little bit of explanation, give us a little bit of background about who you are and what you do now.
Yep. So honored to be here. I started in law enforcement back in 2003 with the Grand Prairie Police Department here up in the North Texas area, and got the honor to serve with them for about 14 and a half years, served in patrol, did a underage alcohol and drug task force for a school resource officer, and then promoted to sergeant, where I served in the best job that I ever had, which was street patrol sergeant. And then unfortunately I'm a nerd, hence the money. And so I got transferred over to the intelligence unit, where I finished out my career and now serve as a reserve. And so I really, Financial Cop came about because of me doing a bunch of stupid stuff with money. And in other words, it qualified me as a rookie. I did what the typical rookie cop does, right? We go through training, we get out of training, we work a bunch of overtime, we buy a bunch of stuff we don't need, and I had built up about $80,000 in debt. The crutch of my debt was a $21,000 car stereo system. Yeah, I spent $21,000 on one stereo system, and I was fortunate enough to find Dave Ramsey and use Dave Ramsey's program to pay off all $80,000 in debt over about a 24-month period. And in 2011, I got asked to start teaching about financial wellness training, and that has since morphed into the largest financial wellness training group in the country, having taught over 10,000 cops over the last 4 years.
Well, let's go back for a second, because, of course, I was a police officer my entire adult life, too. And I think I'm speaking for just about every police officer. I went to the academy when I was 20 years old. I graduated, started law enforcement when I was 21 years old. And back then, 1998, when I graduated and I started law enforcement, that was sometime before you did. And my first job, I was making $21,000 a year. So 1998, $21,000 a year. I thought, first, my question was, they're actually paying me to do this job. And I thought $21,000 was just, wow, that's a lot of money for a 21-year-old kid. But I did like every other cop does, and over my 22 years of being in law enforcement, I witnessed it, and I think we all have, and I think a lot of us, if not all of us, or the majority of us, I should say, has fell into those pitfalls. Yep. And those pitfalls are very real. And typically what I tend to see is a lot of times you take, we'll just call it young adults that their entire life prior to law enforcement, they were working in jobs that were minimal pay. A lot of them I've even seen, this is their first real job. And so they come out and they start making a little bit of money, and what tends to happen? They go through the academy. They're broke when they go through the academy. They go through the FTO program. And even on the FTO program, I've seen this happen. First thing they do is they go out and they buy a $75,000 truck. They put wheels on it. They jack it up. They put a system in it. They put, all these accessories on it. And then they say, now that I have this truck, now what do I got to do? I got to go buy a jet ski.
Yep.
And then they say, well, you know what? Nowadays, depending on where you're at in the country, you can make anywhere between, 30 on the very low end to $75,000 a year starting. And that's a lot of money for somebody that just started this business. Yep. and had essentially a minimum wage job prior to that. So what tends to happen is they start getting into this debt, and I was a victim of it. And I say a victim because we create our own victimization. But really, I think we do a poor job in law enforcement mentoring people in this understanding of this debt that we get into. And one of the things that I think happens is you start building this debt mainly because there's other pitfalls in it. And one of the pitfalls that I saw was throughout the country, a lot of agencies are allowed to work what we call extra jobs. And extra jobs tend to pay more than our regular job. If we're getting paid $25 an hour, an extra job could pay 35 plus an hour.
Yep.
So as a youngster, you start looking at things, you're saying, well, I'll buy this knowing that I can work more extra jobs to pay for this. But then you start realizing, hey, well, I bought a jet ski so I can go and have fun at the lake. But now I have to work extra jobs in order to just pay for the note. So now I can't even use the jet ski to go to the lake and pay for and have fun for what I just bought.
It's a vicious cycle.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And I think, like most people, I can speak for myself, you end up buying all these things, and then later on down the road, you realize that was a dumb decision because you start getting into this debt, and everything that you're purchasing, you never get a return on. You never even get a break even on it because they're all toys. They're all things that we're just not going to, ultimately, be able to use because now we're trying to catch up because we have so much debt. And I think that's the problem that we need to identify and say, okay, well, how do we open people's eyes? I wish somebody would came into my life early on and said, hey, look at some of these things and slow down and look at the big picture, because one of the other things I don't think cops really realize is how fast retirement actually comes up. And I remember thinking when I started and people are talking about retirement and they talk about this 2-to-1 and the 7% and all these other things. And I'm thinking to myself, hey, that's a long time from now. What do I care about what retirement's going to look like? That's, 20 years from now. Well, now I'll share that I'm of course 44 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, man, that went fast.
Yep.
That went really fast. So if I was to ask you, first and foremost, as a mentor in the financial side of things, what would be your advice if I'm 21 years old and I'm coming to you and I say, hey, look, I would really like to, buy a brand new truck, buy a brand new jet ski, buy these different things to have fun with. And of course, we want people to still have fun, but not at the expense of their future.
Yep. And you talked about overtime, and the problem with overtime is that we're one injury away from light duty, and you can't work overtime when you're on light duty. And we get stuck in this cycle where we're working countless hours of overtime, and next thing you know, we get injured, or heck, last year COVID hit, which wiped out overtime altogether, and now we can't pay those bills. And the first thing is I want you to have fun. I want you to have the nice toys. I just don't want those toys to have you in the beginning. And it's about creating that plan, again, from recruit to retiree, to make sure that we're looking at the end goal, which the end goal is to be financially free, but also be in a position to where we can retire when we want to instead of staying and chasing a pension. And the biggest thing we talk to these recruits about is, you're right, we don't do a really good job of preparing them. We bring these proverbial young officers in, 21, 22 years of age. We pay them more money than they've ever made in their entire life, and we wonder why they go out, and next thing you know, they're in debt up to their eyeballs, and we just don't prepare them for that psychological. It's almost like winning the lottery. How many lottery winners end up losing all their money in about 5 years, right? We do the same thing with these young officers with that. And so the keys for the young officers, budgeting, making sure we understand what's coming in and what's going out, and starting to focus on that retirement, because it will shoot up on you before you know it. And there's only one thing you have on this earth that you can't get back, and that's time. And the longer you wait to start looking at this stuff, the harder it is to catch up. The longer you have to start working in retirement, the more that money gets to work for you. And ironically is, the more toys and fun things you get to do down the road with it.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand is one is more so, and I'm going to kind of go down this route, the direction that law enforcement and the understanding of the environment that law enforcement is under now. The one question I get all the time, and ultimately I don't have an answer for it, is how do I get out of law enforcement and start my own career and start my own job or create my own business or what's the next step in law enforcement, that type of thing. And I don't really have a definite answer for them. And the reason why I don't is because the success stories that you see are very minimal.
Yep.
Okay. Not everybody has the opportunity to jump out of law enforcement and then, make a ton of money. So ultimately what we need to do is we need to figure out, how do you exit law enforcement? And I'm not talking about exit law enforcement after 5 years or 10 years. And I understand a lot of people necessarily want to right now. But I also am a believer that we still need great police officers and law enforcement, and the ones that have the fortitude to maintain and retain the positions that they have. Because if we start losing all of our good cops because of the environment that we're in, well, all we're going to be left with is what I call mediocre, and we'll just leave it at that.
We know the cycle. We know what's about to happen. I mean, it's happened multiple times where we have, the cycle where we lower our standards, and that just leads to more problems down the road.
Sure.
And the thing is that it doesn't matter if you want to leave law enforcement and jump off and be a business owner and build a business. It doesn't matter if you want to leave law enforcement and go into your second career, or you want to leave law enforcement and retire. Preparing yourself for that day is what makes you set yourself up for success. And, we've talked a lot about the business side of things. And, when cops come to me and they start talking to me about, I want to open up a business, we talk about getting your financial house in order, because think about how much more easier it would be to get into that next career, get into opening up a business, if our financial house is in order, in the sense that we've got no consumer debt, we've got a fully funded emergency fund, so that we've got that safety net to make those jumps off the cliff to try to become more successful in that sense. And that's on the creating your own business side of things, but it's the exact same principles if you want to retire. Think about how more easier it is to go into retirement if you've got no debt, you've got a fully funded emergency fund. It's the same theme. And I joke when I talk about budgeting with people, and I talk about how, I work with a lot of millionaires, some very, very wealthy millionaires. And it doesn't matter if I was sitting across the table from a millionaire or somebody that was $200,000 in debt. It was about getting the same exact financial pieces in place. It was just on different levels. And obviously it's a different level when you're talking to somebody that's making $1 million a year versus someone that's making 70, but the core principles of what we do to get the financial house in order are exactly the same.
And I'll just kind of reiterate something real quick. So you got a cop, and he's 5 years in, okay? And ultimately, most cop retirements are 20, 25 years, sometimes 30, sometimes point systems, but let's call it 20 to 30 years. 20, 30 years comes very, very quickly. But the thing about it is, after a 20 to 30-year career, you still got a lot of life to live. You're still young. Yep. Again, if you start at 21 years old and you're eligible to retire at 20, you're 41 years old, you have an entire life, a second life to live. And I think what tends to happen, and another pitfall aspect of this, is they look at it in year 19 and they look at 20 and they say, there's no way I can live off that retirement.
Yep.
And so what do they end up doing? They end up continuing to work, or they retire from municipality and they go work for a county agency just to maintain a level of lifestyle. And their whole goal was to be out of law enforcement at 20 years old. I mean, at 20, after doing 20 years. And the one thing about law enforcement, it is very taxing on family.
Yes, very.
It's very taxing on your life. It's very taxing on your physical aspects of life. It's very stressful, not in just the idea of the stress that is created on the job, but it creates stress personally, because it creates a lot of financial stress, creates a lot of family stress.
Yep.
So ultimately, our goal should be, let's be as selfless as we possibly can for 20 years. Selfless. We understand that we're going to give up time for the holidays and Christmas and birthdays and all that good kind of stuff. We understand that. That's part of the selflessness that we're involved in. But I think one of the saddest things that I've witnessed and I've seen is cops that do that better than any other cop that I've ever seen, and they're the most selfless people. But it tends to be that they forget to take care of the one thing that matters when they leave, and that's them and their families. Yep. And ultimately, my question to you is there a true way out if they work 20 years on the pension plan or the retirement plan that they have right now? Because I've never really seen a retirement plan by itself be able to sustain a lifestyle of a cop that's only worked 20 years. Is there a way out other than relying just on that?
There is. And, first and foremost, a pension at 20 years, the way out is not the pension. The pension's a supplement. It's kind of like a part-time job that'll never go away at that point. I mean, again, we're here in Texas. In Texas, in one of our largest pension systems, if you retire at 20 years of service, you're probably going to make, give or take, $2,000 a month. We know that's not enough to sustain the average person. But the way to do it is to start working on your financial house day one. Again, I go back to that budgeting, getting out of debt, starting your deferred comp, starting your IRAs and those separate retirement accounts. Now we put ourselves in a position where we start investing over that time period of 20 years, and we have our pension, plus we have a retirement account that we can start to draw from. And the biggest thing is start preparing for your next career now. And I hate it when I hear cops and they're talking about, well, I got to go work, do another job, but I'm just a cop. All I know how to do is be a cop. You have no clue the amount of skills that you learn in law enforcement that translate into the corporate world. And we neglect ourselves in the sense of we're not out there, we're not networking, we're not making those connections, not realizing that those same networking and connections will potentially lead to your next career. And now you're 20 years in, you got a pension that can supplement you. You've got some retirement savings that can help supplement you. And maybe that gives you that ability to take that job that doesn't pay as much, but you're okay because you got no debt and you've got other retirement options already in place for you.
Yeah. And I 100% concur with you about the idea of the helplessness that cops throw their hands up and say, well, I've only been a cop my entire adult life. I don't know what else to do. And to be honest with you, I'm a living example of that. I lived, breathed 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, nothing but cop work. And that is my skill set that I understood. Now I sell T-shirts. Yep. And ultimately, and I have investments and other partnerships and many other businesses now. And I started to realize, you know what, the things that I learned being a cop translated into ownership of business, translated into the idea of how to relate with customers, how to build financial wealth, not necessarily through the idea of policing the streets, but the idea of how to work with people. Yep. And there's so many different businesses that you can be hired by that are demanding people with those attributes. Mm-hmm. And especially now, a lot of those attributes aren't relatively available by some of the youngsters that don't really have a whole lot of interaction. Yeah. And cops take interaction as a pride aspect. I mean, that's what we do every single day. But and I hear that all the time too, just like you do, and I think many cops can relate to that when they sit there and say, I don't know anything else. So what do I have to do? I have to just stay here. I just have to continue to work and those types of things. When I think that there is an out. But to summarize what you're saying is okay, so they take their pension plan, okay, or the retirement plan or whatever the case may be. Obviously, after 20 years, you're going to make about $2,000 a month average. Obviously, that's not enough. So you're saying do supplementals as well.
Supplemental retirement accounts in most municipalities now have access to what's called a 457 deferred comp.
Now stop right there. Okay. Because when people start talking about 457s and these IRAs and all that other stuff, again, the one thing that I will agree with most cops is that stuff starts to get lost. Yep. And I'm like, dude, help me out. What the hell is a 457? Yep. What is an IRA? What do all these numbers mean? And people throw that out there. And I think most cops kind of nod their head like, yeah, I'm smart enough to figure out this out. But no, I went to the academy. I learned laws. I learned how to put people in jail and how to enforce law. I didn't go to financial school. So explain that to me.
It's one of the reasons I started this company was because I remember when me and my wife, Carrie, went to go meet with our first interview for a financial planner, and we actually met with two, and we walked out of those meetings, and I looked at Carrie, and she looked at me, and she's like, what the hell did they just say? And, my head was spinning. They said all these fancy words and showed me all these fancy brochures, but the reality was I had absolutely no clue what they were going to do with our money. And I looked at Carrie, and I said, we're not going with any of those folks because they didn't have the heart of a teacher. I need to be able to understand what they're going to do with our money because, Carrie, we work too hard for our money just to blindly give it to someone because they've got a title or something. And so what we really did when it comes to financial planning and the financial wellness is we copified this stuff. We simplified it so that it makes sense. I talk about a 457, and does a 401k confuse you, or a 403b? What the heck do all these numbers mean? It's your penal code. all it is it's referenced in the Internal Revenue Code. You want to learn about a 457, go to the section 457 of the Internal Revenue Code. None of that really matters. All that matters when it comes to these accounts are two things: when you can access the money and how am I going to be taxed, i.e., am I going to put money into retirement now that's pre-tax, i.e., I don't pay income taxes on it this year, think your pension, and then when I retire down the road, I've got to pay taxes on what I put in way back in the day plus what it's worth now, the growth? Or am I going to put money into a retirement account where I'm going to contribute from my take-home pay? So I've already paid taxes on that. But now when I retire, I'm going to take money out of it, and I don't pay any income taxes since I paid the taxes back then, including the growth. And so a 457 is called a deferred comp. All you're agreeing to is you're agreeing to defer your compensation today so that when you retire, you can take that. And it doesn't have to be retirement. It can be just leaving at 5 years of service. You're saying, I'm going to put money in retirement, I'm going to defer my income, and then when I leave this agency, I'm going to be able to take that money, and there's no 10% penalty for taking that money out of a deferred comp, no matter how old you are. And so that's one of the cool programs out there that a lot of us have access to, is to supplement retirement by contributing to those accounts.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times if you do that and you set that up from the beginning, and you're not counting that money, it counts it for you ultimately.
Oh, yes.
Because what tends to happen is you start to live within the means of the paycheck that you're actually receiving every single 2 weeks, and the money that is coming out for some of these, I call them supplemental plans. I may be completely wrong in saying that, but they start to add up and add up and add up, and you start to live within the understanding of the things that you do have. And so what you're saying is if somebody was to do that supplemental plan and between the retirement and the supplemental plan, then they'd probably at the 20-year mark be able to retire at the same amount that they're making at that point.
You could. I mean, obviously nobody can predict what the market's going to do, but if you look at the history of the market, investing over a 20-year period, historically, your investments are going to double every 7 to 10 years, depending on what the market does.
Well, now is there an investment that you would recommend that has nothing to do with the market?
Yep. There can be, and this gets into that. We don't understand this stuff, so we just don't do it, and we get scared. And when I teach my class, I always ask, how many of you in here are willing to admit you're scared of the market? And half the people raise their hand, and I always ask why.
Well, that just tells me the other half are lying.
Yeah, it's kind of like when I ask if you've ever done stupid with money, and they don't raise their hands. I'm like, look, you haven't been alive if you haven't done something dumb with money. And we're scared of the stock market, not because of the stock market, because we don't understand it.
Well, and I'll speak for them. The stock market is changing every second.
Yep.
And that's the reason why you have people in Wall Street jumping up and down, yelling at each other, because things change so dramatically. And then there's things that scare us even more, like what would happen with the Reddit deal and with the GameStop deal. And you're almost kind of like, look, again, let me refer back to the understanding. I'm a cop. That's all I've done my entire life. I understand cop work. Now when I'm starting to jump into something that people went to college for and got their master's degree and got PhDs in and those types of things and do this for a living every single day, I know people that sit on their couch every single day, literally watch that computer and trade all day long. And then you're saying, hey, let me jump into this. It'd be the same thing as me asking a non-prior cop to get in the car and say, hey, go handle all these calls real quick.
And there's there's all kinds of different investing. And what you're talking about is day trading. And you can't correlate a day trader to someone that's investing for retirement purposes. And the other big reason we get scared of the market is because we watch too much news. I mean, think about law enforcement. What's our saying? If it doesn't bleed, it doesn't lead. They don't talk about good days in the market. They talk about bad days. And we see the red and we get scared because we see that money going down. But if you look at the history of the stock market, I don't quote me on this, but I think it's the saying is if you've invested for 5 or 6 years, there's not one time in the market's history you've ever lost money. But we all know people that have day traded that have lost their tails. That's short term. But in the long term, slow and steady wins the race. And it's also about understanding your risk tolerance. And that's another, financial nerdy word. What's the risk tolerance mean? What size roller coaster do you want to be in the market? Do you want to be on the Texas Giant where that thing goes way up and potentially goes way down? Or do you want to be on the runaway mine train as an investment, not get the same returns, but you don't have the same roller coaster ride? It goes up and it goes down, but you don't see these huge market swings. And it's really key to understand how you invest money is based on how long it's going to sit there, your time horizon, and what size roller coaster you want to get on. And again, finding that advisor, which that's one of the things we pride ourselves in, is that we have the heart of a teacher that helps you understand what you're investing in, because when you understand it, you become comfortable with it. You understand the ups and downs. You don't freak out when the market goes down because you know it's going to come back down the road if you wait long enough, typically. And understanding the ins and outs of that stuff. Ironically, it's kind of weird. I mentioned earlier, I work with a whole lot of millionaires. I also work with a lot of chiefs of police. So you want to talk about some fun salaries? They make some fun salaries. Ironically, almost every single one of my millionaires that's a first responder is a sergeant and level below. They're all line level officers. My executive command staff that are making more money, very few of them are wealthy because they just make more money and they just start doing more stupid stuff with it.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I can tell you that, of course, I don't work with a lot of cops and their finances, but I do know, and I have worked with cops that I know that did it right and put money aside and figured things out, and they ended up retiring as millionaires.
Oh yeah, multi-millionaires sometimes.
Absolutely. And to me, that's probably one of the most awesome things to know that there is the ability for police officers to have have that understanding. And I'm kind of jumping around, but do you work with just cops, or do you work with essentially anybody that wants to hire you to do things?
I'd say probably 85 to 90% of our clients are cops, just because we're cops. We work with a lot of non-cops that's usually coming from their family members or a civilian or something. But
if somebody's watching this and they say, "Hey, you know what? I really support law enforcement. I've got family in law enforcement. I've got friends in law enforcement. I want to support a company that supports law enforcement." Yep. You'd be open to working with them?
100%. Yep.
Okay. And is there a limit as far as how low of a financial cop or financial situation somebody's in?
Yeah, that's one of the things. It's a good question, because that's one of the things that really differentiates ourselves. And I remember when I first came into this industry, I was kind of given the lowdown of, hey, Nick, you don't want to work with anybody that's got less than this amount. And
well, then good luck. You're dealing with cops. I mean, so it's not like you're dealing with a ton of money here.
And it's one of the reasons I created Financial Cop, because I always hated that, because I sat there and I looked at this and I went, okay, so you're telling me I got a rookie cop that comes in and they only have, a couple $1,000s to invest, and I should ignore them? Well, first off, they're cops, and it's very difficult for me in my inner cop to tell another cop, no, I'm not going to help you. But two, how do you turn somebody that doesn't have a lot of money into somebody that has a lot of money if you're not willing to take on those people? And so it's kind of one of our mottos. There's a lot of firms out there that won't take you unless you're close to retirement or you've had a certain amount. Our philosophy is we're here to help you from recruit to retiree. I don't care if you don't have any money. Think about that. Somebody comes to us and they say, well, I'd like to invest, but I don't have any money right now. Well, they probably have issues going on where we need to help them with a budget. We need to help them get out of debt, look at life insurance so that we can get their financial house in order. I mean, it's kind of why we call it building financial strength in first responder families. Let's build your financial strength to get you to the point where you can invest. So that's a long-winded answer to say, no, we don't have minimums. I don't care how small you are. We'll take care of you, especially if you're a cop, because that's what cops do. We take care of each other.
Okay. So let me just kind of get into what it is that you actually provide. Okay. And really the reason why I wanted you to be a guest on our show today is because, one, this is what Relentless Defender is all about. Relentless Defender is about connecting cops to resources, and really the reason why we kind of created this podcast is to do exactly what we're talking about here, is to support police officers, support first responders, and provide them avenues in order to ultimately use as resources for the benefit of them. So if a cop comes to you and he says, and I'm just playing this out, and I think a scenario-based way is probably the best way to do this. A cop comes to him and says, hey, here's where I'm at. I've been a cop for 7 years. I've only been inputting money into my retirement plan, okay? My plan is to retire at 20 years.
Yep.
And the reason why is because, and typically it's conversations like this that I always hear all the time. I've already talked to my wife, my kids will be at a certain age or whatever the case may be. But I'll continue doing my job, that type of thing. But I want to get out at 20 years, and I want to be able to maintain where I'm at. And I sit down with you and I show you what I got, and we all kind of typically, and I'm talking about every cop right now. So at a 7-year cop, let's just put it that way, he knows what he's got, that type of thing. What are you going to tell me?
So I'm going to plug you into one of our 3 tiers, and that's really kind of ties into the 3 services that we focus on. We focus on full service financial planning, financial wellness training, and financial crisis coaching. And you may not be in one of those tiers. You may cross into a couple of them. And so a 7-year officer is probably going to be a cross between that financial wellness tier and that financial planning tier.
So go into financial wellness. Explain what financial wellness is and what you're going to do for me on that.
Yep. We're going to help teach you about all the different topics about financials. And people talk about financial planning and they think investments. Well, financial planning, to me, if it's done the right way, is not just financial planning. It's making sure that we've got debt reduction programs in place, ensuring that we've got a fully funded emergency plan in place, and ensuring we've got a will and estate planning in place, legacy planning, so that if we pass away, our family's prepared, life insurance planning. Making sure that we're avoiding the financial pitfalls. And so we've got a couple of things. Obviously, we've got agencies from all across the country that bring us in to teach a 4-hour financial wellness class. We actually launched Financial Cop Virtual Academy back in January. Matter of fact, Ground Zero Media was our video producer. They did a phenomenal job on helping us produce that. So we can help plug you into that side of it to get you into the financial wellness training in that sense. And then we're going to cross into the financial planning, which is really kind of the core business that we do, which is a full-service fiduciary-only financial planning firm.
Now I'm going to ask the next question that I think a 7-year cop would ask. That sounds expensive.
Well, it's really not. And, when it comes to working on the financial planning side of things, what's really made us unique is that I asked the question in the class, why do we not trust financial planners? Same thing with the stock market, because we don't understand them. We got these shirt and ties that come in and they say these fancy things or we know somebody that got screwed or whatever. There's 2 types of financial planners in this country. There are what are called broker dealers, and they're the big guys. There's smaller broker dealers as well. And when you work for a broker dealer, you fall into what's called the suitability status. In other words, they can put you into investments irregardless of the cost, as long as they can deem that it's suitable for you. So think reasonable suspicion, 51% correct. Those kind of financial advisors are typically compensated based on commissions, kickbacks to them through the investments. So there's always a little bit of a conflict of interest. Are they putting you in things that are good for you or good for both of you? Well, it's both of you. And there's nothing wrong with that model if you understand it, but most people don't. The other type of financial planner is called a fiduciary or a registered investment advisor. And a fiduciary advisor is required by law to put your interests ahead of theirs, irrespective of what's going on. In other words, I have to ensure that I put your interests ahead of mine at all times. They're compensated based on flat fee schedules or flat AUM fees, assets under management, those kinds of things. And the problem in this country is that the vast majority of financial planners are duly registered. They're both. So you really never know who the heck you're working with. Well, one of the things that we did at Financial Cop is we ensured that we stayed on the fiduciary side only. We did that for a couple reasons. One, I always say it's a blessing and a curse to work with cops. It's a blessing because we're sitting here as cops. There's that trust factor because we are brothers in blue in that sense. It's also a curse because I work with cops. You all know each other. And so if I screw up one account, I might as well shut my doors. Well, if I can stay on that fiduciary side, I have that backing to know that, hey, we were required to do this. I can never dibble dabble into this commission world over here and kickbacks and all that fun stuff. And I really felt like the fiduciary side was also a lot more transparent and that you always know what you're paying. The fee structures are extremely simplified. So it's not really that expensive based in that sense.
So if I was a 7-year cop, what kind of money do I need to bring to the table in order for you to take on my account and start working with me?
So if you're a smaller client in that sense, then we would likely look at we have a subscription program where we'll, for a small monthly fee, depending on how much assets you have, we'll plug you into managing those investments, but also get you plugged into, again, the wellness initiatives, budgeting, coaching, those kinds of things. If you're a larger client, then we start to look at the assets under management, and depending on how much assets depends on the fee of that gets charged throughout the account. So it can slide depending on, obviously, the more assets you have, the less expensive it can get.
Okay. I'm going to keep pushing you, brother, because it's one of those things that as a cop, and I've got to ask the questions for the people that follow. If I'm a 7-year cop and I come in and I say, hey, here's where I'm at.
Yep.
My question is can I afford it?
So let's say you get into the subscription model side of things where we're managing a certain amount of investments, but a small amount of investments, but we're also helping you with budgeting, counseling, debt reduction program, real estate. It's usually $50 a month for something like that.
Okay.
If we're getting into the asset management, let's say you bring $500,000 in investments, then it's usually going to be a flat rate fee of around 1.1% of assets annually. Mm-hmm. And again, it's a flat base fee. So it's, if you've ever heard the commercials from Fisher Investments, one of the things they say is it's structured in a manner to where if we do better, you do better. That's how we're structured. It's managed in that sense to where if your accounts go down, we make less. If your accounts go up, we make more. But that's anything under $1 million, we typically charge a flat fee of 1.1% of assets under management. Anything over $1 million, we start to get into the 0.85% annually. But the other thing is that because we're fiduciaries and we can't be compensated on the back end, our internal expense ratios, which most advisors don't talk about, every mutual fund in the world has expense ratios. They can range from next to nothing all the way to 2-3% on top of it. That's where those broker dealers oftentimes will get compensated on the back end from those higher expense ratio funds.
And I can tell you, to me, that's fair.
Yep.
And the reason why is because especially when, and I'll talk about $1 million account. When you talk about $1 million account, not only are you trying to save for yourself, but you're also trying to save yourself from the tax man as well.
Right.
So when you start talking about $1 million accounts, the idea is to invest as much as possible to make sure that the government doesn't get too much of your money, and that is what it is. And I'm going to tell you very frankly, no matter how much money you make, you want to keep the majority as much as you possibly can, or the majority of much as you possibly can. And times are changing every single day now that we're living in, and I'm going to tell you. And the listeners know this, you know this, and that type of thing. It's going to get more and more difficult. Yep. And if we think that we can just hold money, pay a little bit of tax, and then live life, I don't think that's the way the things are set up these days. No, we're being taxed very heavily. I don't care who you are. I don't care what class you're in. I don't care how much money you make. Taxes are going through the roof. Yep.
Well, you got to be careful. So industry average right now, it seems like it falls around that 1.35%. But occasionally you'll get some of these broker dealers that'll come in and they'll charge maybe a flat 1% fee. But again, that's where that transparency comes in. You know, we said it a second ago, that expense ratio. They don't talk about those expense ratios, and that, again, that may add 2-3% on the other side of it. Well, again, because we can't get compensated by the investments, we can't have that conflict of interest. Our expense ratios are extremely low depending on the risk tolerance you're in. And so we found that, you know, your all-in fee with us is usually 60, sometimes 70, 80% of what you would pay somewhere else because we don't get those kickbacks.
And for example, and I've had some of the bigger brokerages, and of course you do all my stuff now, but we've had some of those bigger brokerages, and typically where they get you, and kind of breaking it down from my perspective of it, where he gets you is I'm not paying them straight up money.
Yeah.
But then when I get my statement in, there's this removal of money from money that was mine, and you don't necessarily miss it because they're kind of just pulling it out, and then you start looking at it, you're like, that was a lot of money they just pulled from me.
It is. And, you know, again, transparency. When I teach the class, we have a section called How to Interrogate Your Financial Planner. We're cops, right? Use our senses and our interrogation skills.
Kind of what we're doing right now. Yeah. I'm interrogating you for them.
And so, you know, I tell people, when you start talking about fees, take a 4x6 postcard, slide it across the table and say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Financial Advisor, write your fees down. Oh, by the way, if you turn it over, I'm walking out the door. Mm-hmm. And your fee structure should be so transparent. So, for instance, ours, I can fit it on the first line. That's it. It's that simple. It should be that easy. And, you know, my favorite answer I ever got when someone said, I asked, why do we not trust financial planners? Somebody looked at me and said, because they make money. And I said, really? If you pay someone to come mow your lawn every week, they make money. Do you not trust them? And the person looked at me back, and it was female. She goes, no, I don't, because I know what they did. I go, that's why you don't trust a financial planner. It should be transparent. When the fees are there, you should be able to call your financial planner anytime and go, what are my fees? Why did these fees occur? Where are they coming from? Again, everything should be transparent, because when you have that kind of transparency, that trust is there.
So, and we don't have much time left, so let me just kind of wrap up a few things real quick. When it comes down to it, and we're going to kind of change the script a little bit, not just financial planning, because I know that's what you do and that type of thing. So let's answer some of the questions that we get, or I get a lot of times of, I am a cop. I'm coming up now on my 20 years, okay, and I want to start a new life. I want to start a new career. I want to start a new life. And they say, you know what? I want to start my own business. Yep. And that tends to be something that, one, I encourage. I encourage people, because understanding this, I was a cop for my entire adult life, and I come to learn then, of course, during the time that, and we're reiterated, that's all I knew. But then I also realized when I started my own business, that is the most free and liberating aspect of life that you could ever live. Yep. Because you no longer are under the scrutiny that you were as a police officer. And two, now you have no ceilings and no caps. Because I always tell people, if you want to make money, if you want to make money in life, there's no way you're going to be able to make money working for somebody else. The amount of money that you could expect. You're never going to get wealthy. You're never going to get rich working for somebody. And the reason why is because they put a cap on you. Yep. And you're only going to be worth so much to that person working for them. So what would you advise somebody that comes and says, hey, I'm in 18 years now. I've got 2 years to go, and I want to start my own business. What would you advise them to start preparing for? Because, and I know this doesn't necessarily talk about the financial cop aspect of things, but let's talk about entrepreneurship and business, yep. and that's one of the questions I get all the time. What would your advice be?
Find your passion. I've been back to Grand Prairie, multiple times, and I'll have the troops sit there and go, man, it must be nice to make your own schedule up. And I'm like, man, I work more hours than I ever worked when I was a cop. But the difference is I don't feel like I'm working anymore. Find what your passion is and turn that into a career, and you'll never work another day in your life, no matter how much you do work. And you hit it. There's a cap when you work for somebody. Usually when you own a business, you got to go hunt and kill it. And sometimes that's a good thing, because if you don't go hunt, and kill something, you don't eat it, right? But
there's also a direct reflect on the amount of work that you do and the amount of hunting you do and the amount of killing you do. Because ultimately the cool thing, the most addicting thing about owning a business, yep. is you have a direct reflect of how much work you're putting in is how much you're getting back out. And you're absolutely right about the idea of work and the amount of hours. Ultimately, I work 60 to 80 hours a week. Yep. I work weekends, I work nights, I work all the time. And people sit there and a lot of times they'll question that, and they'll sit there and say, man, you work way more than you did when you were a cop. And my response every time, and I guarantee you, and I've talked to many other entrepreneurs, I guarantee you every single one of them will say the exact same thing. It doesn't feel like it. Yep. It doesn't feel like work when it's your work, when yep. you're getting the direct response out of it and the direct reflect of your input out. And in fact, to the point where it almost becomes very addicting.
It can, yes.
To the point where you're sitting there saying, hey, I live it, I breathe it, I want to get up early, I want to stay late, I yep. want to make these things happen. And I think that's the pitfall of the perception of owning your own business, because a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to own my own business, and then somehow all this greatness is going to happen, and people only see the tip of the iceberg, yeah. and that old understanding. They never see what's under the water, and there's so much that goes on below it. But talk about the preparation for that. They've got 2 years to go, yep. okay? What would you advise them to do to prepare in the next 2 years to start their business.
So I'm going to take you through my prep. And, my prep is first and foremost making sure my wife was on board, because ultimately she's got to be on board with it, because we're taking the risk on as a family in essence. And so a couple years out, we really started to look at this and go, okay, what do we need to do to jump off that proverbial cliff? We started to shore up the financial house. We were fortunate. We were already debt free in that sense, so we didn't have to worry about that. But if you've got debt, the more payments on a monthly basis you can eliminate, the less income you need, the more you can focus on a business. And we talk about businesses failing, and and unfortunately most businesses don't make it. And the reason most businesses don't make it, I think, is because of debt. And people go, well, no, it's because they don't have customers. Well, no, the debt forced them to not have enough time to find the customers to make it work. And so we really shored that up. We really shored up our emergency fund. We went from a 3 to 6 month emergency fund to 12 months. I wanted to have enough money in the bank so that if this didn't work, I could still maintain lifestyle with my family. But again, that also helps you find those little things to do to make sure that the company is successful. And then when you jump off that cliff, be prepared to work your ass off, because if you don't work your ass off, you won't get the benefit of what you're going to build. People think, and we deal with this with law enforcement, we're used to going to a job, logging in and waiting for the first call of service to hit. Well, it's no longer that way. You're going to go get to your job whatever time you're going to get there. And it's not waiting for the phone to ring. It's it's making the phone ring now, finding out what you're going to do to be successful. But the crutch of it is it doesn't matter what kind of business idea you have. If your financial house is not in order when you make that jump, it's going to make it that much more difficult. One of my favorite quotes, as much as I hate to say his name now because he's a little bit more controversial than he used to be, is from Mark Cuban. And he says, if you take out a loan, you're no longer the boss, your banker's the boss, and you're no longer in a position to do whatever it takes to survive. And that's what business ownership is. It's about surviving, but we got to make sure we don't get lost in the survival. It's about surviving so that we can thrive, so that we can do the things we want to do with our family, giving back, all those good things. We've had multiple conversations about becoming successful and obviously the financial fortunes that come with that. But we both have had the same result in the conversation with it was, I've had more fun building this business to make the money I'm making, to be in a position to give back the way I'm able to give back. And that's the beauty of building something that helps our brothers and sisters, but also having the ability to stay humble and give back to our brothers and sisters.
Well, and that's something I wanted to bring up that I didn't even put notes down to bring up. Let's talk about your give back.
I hate this part.
but it's important, and I can tell you that I think it's important, especially in the idea of your niche market. Your niche market is law enforcement and first responders. And the one thing that I understand very, very heavily, that if all you're doing is using that niche for your own benefit, and you're sitting there saying, I am going to just sit in this market, sit in this niche, and going to reap the reward from the niche, but not give back to the niche, I can tell you, and I see a lot of companies do that. Okay, a lot of companies that sit there and say, I'm gonna take from this niche because I know that I can do that.
Yep.
Okay. But they have no input back and they have no give back. Let's talk about your give back. And I can tell you that I have witnessed, okay, a lot of the give back that you do. You're always donating to different nonprofits. You're donating to banquets. You're donating to fallen officer fundraisers. You're donating all the time. And the interesting thing about it is a lot of that is never even known. A lot of that's not even advertised. And I know you don't like to talk about it, but I see it, I witness it. And that's also one of the reasons why, more so, not even just one of the reasons, because ultimately I'm in a position where I could pretty much hire anybody I want to manage my money. But that is the primary reason, I should say, as to reason why I would trust you and believe in you and use you over anybody else, is because of your sincerity and your love and your want to give back.
Yep.
So I think that's a huge important aspect of who you are and what you guys do as a company, as ultimately as human beings in this niche. And so for that, I applaud you.
Thank you.
But I think if I was to give advice, one, it would be you're 2 years out. Exactly what you said. Find something that you're passionate about. I think you're dead on that. Okay. But two, more importantly, find a purpose over product. And we have made that our mission here is purpose over product, because if you sell a purpose, the product will sell itself. And ultimately that's what you're doing is you're selling a reason. You're selling a reason why. You're selling a end game. And if people understand the end game and they can see that and they can visualize that, and cops are very, very, very visual minded. Yep. So if you sit there and show them the path, you sit there and show them what they're going to look like by the end of whatever their goal is, that helps them follow it. Yeah. And I think what happened, and I've seen it many times in my career, is when I'm talking to a financial advisor, they don't do a very good job of showing the path. They don't do a very good job of showing what the end goal is. If I see it and I can hear it and I can visualize it, it helps me stay on track. Yeah. And same thing for somebody that wants to start their own business. Start with the end in mind. Start with where you want to be, and then start working backwards. Yep. And if you have the ability to do that, combined with the ability to not be afraid to work your ass off, you can start any business. Yeah. I tell people now, I know the blueprint. If somebody came to me and says, hey, I want to start a pressure washing business right now, I guarantee I can make that a very successful, if not $1 million plus business. Yep. If somebody came to me and says, I want to start selling cookies, okay, well, let's work on it. I guarantee I can show the blueprint. Just like you're saying with the financial side, we also know every business has the same principles. Every business has the same principles to success. And as long as you follow those principles of it, I think any one of
hard work.
Absolutely. And don't get into the rut of saying, all I know is this. All I know is firefighting. All I know is police work. All I know is whatever. Yep. No, you know that, but you branch from that.
I mean, people ask me, do you have a degree in finance? No. How did you, what qualifies you? Because I did a lot of stupid stuff with money, and I realized that I go back to when I was first teaching the class at the department, and I remember having a conversation with my chief one day, and he said, I'm really proud of what this class has turned into. And I looked at him and I said, I got to be honest with you, Chief, I hate this class. What do you mean you hate the class? I go, I hate the class because every time I teach it, I feel like this is what I should be doing. I should be helping cops with this. And I hate that because I love being a cop, and it's tearing me from that. And that ultimately is what became my purpose was, you talk about people, the end game, and everybody used to laugh at me when I first looked at becoming a financial advisor. I got recruited by all these big box broker dealers, and when I told them that my core business practice was going to be helping first responders first on the financial wellness, they all laughed at me and said, well, you can't make any money doing that. Now they're all coming to me going, how do we replicate this? Well, you don't, because you that's not in your core. You don't know how to do that. All you know how to do is try to make money off of people. If you do the right things for the right reasons, everything will work out.
Absolutely. So let's wrap this up. Quick questions. Where can they find you? And what we'll do is we'll put links up. And the other thing I want to ask is when the comments start coming in, do you mind if you answer them?
Perfect. Yeah, I'm more than happy to answer them. So there's a couple ways you can find me. So you can go to our website, www.financialcop.com. Obviously, we're on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. You can follow us at FinancialCop as well. There's all kinds of ways on the website. There's a ton of resources to teach people about this stuff, but there's ways to reach out to us on that as well. And happy to answer any questions on the comments. And again, anything we can do to help.
And you also have because John, the producer, and also my partner in Ground Zero Media, he created some videos for you. You mentioned that just a little bit ago. Where can they find those videos, and how do they work in that? What is that?
So on the Financial Cop, there's a financial wellness section, and on there, what we did is that we, obviously with COVID, we had to find creative ways to get out there because nobody was traveling, and so we took our core class that we teach in person, and we created Financial Cop Virtual Academy. So it's the same 4 hours that we teach in person, but it also, we're in development with them right now to build about 10 more hours of curriculum where we're going to be doing actual budget workshops for cops, actual debt reduction, and understanding city benefits. And so they can purchase the Financial Co-op Virtual Academy on there. You get a full year access to it. It's unlimited time, so it's not like you buy it and you go through it once. You can go through as many times as you want. You have the ability to interact with us one-on-one if you have questions about that. So that's a huge way, again, in that financial wellness component to start to learn about how to build your financial strength.
Okay. Well, guys, I want to first thank you, Nick, for coming on here and working and explaining some things. But there's no way in the amount of time that we had to really express and really do as much as we possibly can. That's the reason why he has the resources. So find him on Facebook. Find him on Instagram or no?
No, not on Instagram.
Get an Instagram, man.
It's one more social media thing to manage.
I understand. but more importantly than anything, go to www.financialcop.com. Okay, you can find them there. If you have questions, you have comments, just put them here, and he'll answer them the best he possibly can, or refer you to a link or whatever he needs to do to get that. But guys, as always, we are here for you. This is the reason why we did this. I think I asked the tough enough questions that you guys may want to ask. And I can tell you in all reality, if you are looking for financial advice, financial planning, better retirement options, those types of things, trust your future with Nick and his company. I can tell you that I do. And it's one of the reasons why he's down here from ultimately the Dallas area is because not only are we having a podcast, but we're meeting about my own financial aspects of things, and that's exactly what he does. So if I trust him, I'm literally putting my stamp of approval on it. So,
and for compliance, that was unsolicited. I did not expect him to do that. So
that is true. That is true. And the reason why I say that is because I understand in the comp world and then really in the world today that we can sit here and talk all day and it all could be BS until somebody says, hey, this is legit. Okay. And I'll tell you that this man is legit. But thank you guys. And if you have any questions, concerns, you know where to reach out to. I appreciate everything. I appreciate you coming on. And as always, guys, God bless and stay relentless.